Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. This show is designed to highlight the work of leaders here in the United States and then beyond. Today with us, we have Father Mike Vetrano, and Father Mike Vetrano is the pastor of the Sacred Heart Basilica Church located in Southampton, New York. And Father Mike, welcome to Successful Philanthropy. And I want to start first with a little information about the Basilica of the Sacred Heart. And can you give us a little history?
Oh, I'd be happy to, Gene. Thanks very much, and thanks for having me on the show with you. Where the Basilica of the Sacred Hearts, I'll tell you in a minute how it became a basilica, but it began as a church built in 1907 for the people of Southampton. At that time, what was happening was that there were many Irish immigrants who were the workers in many service tasks here in Southampton, and they made it known to the wider community that if they were to be around full time, and especially on the weekends, that they would need a place to worship. And so the inspiration of starting to build a Catholic church in Southampton, that's how it began. Along the way, there were some really interesting things that happened. This marvelous looking building that we have now was originally designed as a red brick sort of traditional church. And even as it was being put up and built, the architects who were from Manhattan were able to get access to the discarded pieces of white marble that were being used to and quarried for the New York City Public Library on 45th Street, which I think if you've seen that, the very huge, beautiful white building, well, it's very pure and white, and so every block of marble that came off the truck from Vermont, somebody took a look at and decided whether it was good enough or not good enough for that library. And Sacred Hearts Church and a number of public buildings in the New York area, we got the rejected marble. But when you put it all together, it looks remarkably good. And there's a saying in one of the passages of scripture that the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. So in a lot of ways, for people here in Southampton at this church, that's kind of our motto, that we are those stones that are put together and has become a source of strength and hope for people. Over the
Yes.
years, a lot of change, a lot of growth, a lot of new things. Still very much a home to, well, it's a home to lots of different kinds of people, to the vacationers to come here, people who've lived here on Long Island all their lives, people who've come to settle here in retirement. And of course, we're still a home for people who've come to our shores looking and hoping for a better life and for employment. Our big immigrant community today is obviously our Hispanic community that does so much work in so many areas of service here on Long Island. So our mission in that way kind of continues. Back
Yes.
in back in the end, back in about 2011, a petition was made for the church to become a basilica, and that was granted by Pope Benedict back just shortly before his retirement.
Yes. And getting back to the immigrants,
Mhm.
you mentioned in 1907 that the church was primarily built for the Irish immigrants, and Southampton and the Hamptons is filled with many immigrants right now, primarily of Latin American and South American descent. But talk a little bit about their importance to the church and then to the community, because right now we're seeing a big, enormous influx of immigrants coming in through our southern border. And when I've been in church, I know the priest has always told us to open up our hearts. And I want to hear from you what exactly is the role and the importance of the immigrants in our community.
Well, first of all, I'd say that one of the things that's remarkable is that um, between a third and a half of our active parishioners are exactly in that profile that you mentioned, from Latin America, from Central America, South America, and they they are they perform numerous kinds of tasks in our community, from very professional work to service work, and they've all had the experience of that great move from a place that they were living to come to the United States. And when we hear their stories of danger, of poverty, of need, lack of opportunity for their children, wanting them to grow up in a world where they could go to school and college and choose careers. And it's actually, I've come to realize in so many conversations that it's a huge leap of faith to pack everything up and to move to another land with really only your hopes. And I think it's because of that places like our church really become like the anchor spot. It's where they come together to be with others. It's where they pray about their futures. It's where they carry on their religious traditions. And that's one of the most beautiful things about uh, the church right here, Sacred Hearts, is that when it comes to when it comes to family participation, we see that the church is filled not only with elders, but with young people, children, grandparents, and they all want to be together and to pray. In a little while, in December, we have the beautiful feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and on that feast, we've obviously not able to celebrate it fully in the last couple of years with everything that happened with COVID, but typically our church will have almost 1,000 people in and around it coming to celebrate their patronal feast, which is so important to them.
And it's very important for people to have a place to gather and also to worship God, regardless of whether you're Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, or Islamic. It's important to have a place to congregate. And it's so important in this community that the Catholics have a place. Now, Father Vetrano, you are a priest and you've been pastor of the Sacred Heart Basilica for the last 10 years. Talk a little bit about what it was like to actually become a priest. The Catholic Church has indicated that fewer and fewer men are deciding to go into the priesthood. And what can we do to change that?
Well, that's an enormous question. I don't know if I have the answer for that. I can tell you that it is without a doubt the best choice that I ever made about anything in my whole life. And I've been a priest now for 42 years, and I have enjoyed every day of it. It's a challenging life, and we face a lot of different things, but to be involved in people's lives for all these pivotal things, for their need, for their weddings, for their funerals, for their baptisms, for worship every day is just an awesome privilege. And I can't think of anything more I'd rather do than to be involved in life in that way. And we have an opportunity too to really be a positive voice in this world. And I think that that's really when it comes to preaching the gospel and speaking to my congregation and others, we clergy here, the other various ministers in town, we are a very important voice of positivity and altruism for not only our own congregants, but for the whole culture that we're a part of. And I think that's very, very much needed today.
No question, with everything going on in the world, with the unfortunate and horrific war in the Ukraine, and then all the hurricanes and everything else going on and political unrest. Well, I think people need to turn to religion, and it's an anchor. And as you said, a positive force in the lives of people, which is something that not just a few people need, but everyone need.
Mhm.
Now, Father Vetrano, you also have a school there, and you teach children, I guess, through 12th grade. Is that correct?
Well, we actually go up to the 8th grade. We're from kindergarten to 8th grade. Our Lady of the Hampton School. It's actually on the campus of Our Lady of Poland Church, but there are three parishes that share the responsibility. We call it a regional school. So Our Lady of Poland, Sacred Heart Church, and St. Rosalie's in Hampton Bays are the three pastors that come together to help to provide for that school. And Sister Kathy Schluter is the principal, and she does an absolutely wonderful job.
Very nice. And Father Vetrano, how do you maintain a church and a parish such as yours financially? It must be quite a challenge. And I understand right now you have a situation with the facade of the church where the facade is falling apart because the church was built a long time ago, and like anything else, it needs repairs. What do you do to keep the church going?
Well, I think a lot of it is just to really be very upfront with people about things that we need and about the situation of the church, and in a way to really trust their love for it. It's so important to people that when we talk about where something is broken or damaged, and again, with a building that's 120 years old and has that wonderful history, obviously you don't, when something is broken, you just don't go out and buy a new one from the store. Uh, the doors are 100 years old and have all that significance, and the stained glass windows, even the marble itself. So I like to say that every repair is actually a work of restoration. And we kind of have an ideal of the way that the church was built is what we want to preserve. That's the history. We don't want to change the appearance or change the sense of awe and reverence that comes along with the way it was designed. So we're always constantly going back to try to restore the church to its original beauty. You're right. Right now, that's why I wanted you to be able to see the church behind us there. If you look at that whole front, that big, huge stained glass window, and then under that, there's some decorative wood carvings, and then there's the actual doors to the church. And we started out early this summer with a plan that needed to be painted. And it seemed at the time that all we really needed was to scrape it down, take off the old paint, and do a good paint job. And the first day our workers went up to the top of the stained glass window, they began to discover that behind the flaking paint was just rotted wood. And we brought in a structural engineer, an architect, an expert in stained glass, and they told us that, well, 120 years of being pounded by northeasters, and that's the exposure that that front is on, has really, really penetrated it. In fact, the great story, the workers, when they were up there and they were doing this, pulling things apart, they were actually seeing the window move, that it was actually that loose in its frame. So they actually, being good Catholics and very responsible, they went right down and got a truss beam, put it across the middle of the window at the top, and anchored it in so that it would be safe. And then they painted it so that it would look good for the congregants and people who are visiting here in the summer. And they did such a good job that people thought, wow, that's wonderful. It's done, it's all fixed, but hardly. The underpinnings are in very, very bad shape. So it's really kind of three projects. It's the window that needs to come out, have its frame be built, and have its stained glass set and make sure that's in perfect shape. Then there's all that architectural woodwork over the years that's been patched with various different kinds of material, and it kind of all coming apart there. And then even the frames that hold the doors, and each door is about 250 pounds, is all, if you go take a close-up look at the church, you can actually see where it's clearly rotted through in a lot of places since it's all been exposed.
And what is the estimate, the amount of funds that are needed to repair the facade of the 120-year-old Sacred Heart Basilica in Southampton?
Well, we're looking at a project that will probably be near $300,000.
And it should
Basically
start
means
And I
Basically,
would
almost the whole front of the church has to come out and be rebuilt.
And I would imagine that it needs to start sooner than later because you don't want the facade of the church to fall apart or fall down and be a danger to people.
We'll be starting the project before the middle of October for sure. And we need to do that because the architect and the engineer said this is really not a good situation and we don't want the window to suffer damage during the winter. We don't want to have another winter tearing away at the window with the now even more exposed um, unsafe wood conditions and so forth. So needs to start.
Yes, and for those watching the show who would like to donate, Father Vetrano, what is the website to donate to the Basilica of Sacred Heart in Southampton?
Well, you can always visit our website, www.shjmbasilica.org. And very shortly, we'll have more explicit information there on, on how people can participate in what we're calling the window rescue. But certainly now, if a person were to hear this and want to reach out and give us a call, we'd be happy to receive that call.
Yes, I think it's very important for the entire community to have the church remain intact because it is a major support for people throughout the Hamptons and also a historical site. I don't know if it's an historical landmark, but Father, you can tell us that.
It's in the historical district, and uh, we're not a designated landmark, which is a whole other level of things. But uh, in terms of the village, we are in that historic district, and of course, in terms of its identity as a basilica, um, part of that, part of the reason it was chosen for that honor was its architectural beauty. So we have a real mission to preserve that and to secure that. And again, when you look back at the history over the years, there's been a number of times where we called on the community to help with different projects. Back after I came here in 2012, we did not have air conditioning in the church. Uh, a big problem in the summer. It was pretty overheated, and it was a real challenge because the church doesn't really have the kind of modern framing and so forth where you can put in ducts and things like that. But we were able to put in a geothermal system, very green and very eco-friendly, and it was a project that worked out great. It was supported widely by our own parishioners, of course, but lots and lots of other friends in the community really came together and wanted to help us in that way. And that kind of spirit goes back to the very beginnings when, who built this church? It was not only the Catholic community, but many other communities in town that had an interest in benefiting the worship of people who lived here and the Irish immigrant community in particular. And it's always had a very wide sense of ownership here in the village.
Yes, it's a beautiful church and an important church. And for our audience, we are with Father Mike Vetrano, who is the pastor of the Sacred Heart Basilica Church in Southampton, New York. And he's just spoken about the history of the church, also the present needs of the church to repair the facade, which after 120 years is now in dire need of repair. And now I want to switch, Father, and speak a little bit about the underserved population of people living in the Hamptons. Many people think, well, the Hamptons is for the rich and the famous, and this is where the rich and the famous go to summer. And that is true in a way, but we also have a population of people here who live at or below the poverty level. And as a church and as a community, what can we all do to help out?
Well, you've really hit the nail on the head. We have, and I think it's a good thing that we have some of the most blessed and wealthy people in the world who choose to live here and vacation here. and we have people who are most on the edge. Some of them are the immigrant community. That's a huge problem for them, especially for housing, where to live. And I think anybody who contemplates living in Southampton these days, whether it's one of those families or a new family starting out or a couple getting married, they wonder how they'll be able to afford that. So affordable housing is huge. And and it's not just a problem that belongs to that kind of community. There's also elderly people and people who've been here for years that are, totally becoming overcome with the cost of things and the difficulties in the economy right now. So we have a lot to do. We've had a wonderful fund here at the church for several years, the Adopt a Family Fund, where we can offer some assistance to people who are, getting started with a new place or need something to help close the gap. And we've been doing a lot of assistance in that way.
All very, very important. And I know there are many charities in the Hamptons that attempt and do address the issue of poverty, but it's always nice to know that the religious institutions are also very, very involved. And Father, we have a few minutes left, and what would you like to bring up that we haven't already discussed?
Well, that's a good question. I think that I would say about being here and being in Southampton and the work that I do, that one of the most remarkable things about this village is how the different religious communities know each other and pull together. Uh, I work very closely with Father Patrick at the Episcopal Church and Joanne Utley, the pastor of the Methodist Church. In fact, and Father Constantine over at the Orthodox Church. We're all good friends. We spend time together. We try to have prayer services and events together. And it's one of the real gifts of this community is that kind of sense of, real granular, intimate living together and working as one family. It's exactly what's most important in the world today, and I feel very blessed to be part of it. We're often ourselves the chaplains for the police department, the fire department, and take part in the people who keep us safe and work for us here. And so it's just an absolute place of blessing for me. And love the village, love my community, very much love my church, and I know that kind of love is what will see us through all these difficulties.
Well, thank you, Father Vetrano, and Southampton is most fortunate to have you involved in the community. And Father Vetrano, the website once more for those watching this show who might want to donate to help with the restoration of the facade of the Sacred Heart Basilica in Southampton. Can you give it once more, please?
Sure, that's www.shjm for Sacred Hearts Jesus Mary Basilica.org. Or if it's too hard to remember that, all you have to do on Google is type in Basilica of the Sacred Heart Southampton. We'll be first in the list.
Well, thank you very much. And Father Mike Vetrano, you've given a wonderful interview, and I want to wish you much luck with the facade of the church. And I know that you will get it repaired beautifully, and the funding will come in. And with all the other problems in the community, well, I think we all can help and pitch in, because philanthropy is all about helping those around us. And for those who have more resources than others, well, we have an obligation to open up our hearts and open up our wallets. This concludes Successful Philanthropy. Our guest today, Father Mike Vetrano. He is the pastor of the Basilica of Sacred Heart in Southampton, New York. I'm Jean Shafiroff, your host. I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Jean.